The ability of a compressor to condense loudness by increasing the quiet parts of the signal through the release of the amplifier is determined by the shape of the release curve. If you want to achieve subtle results, adjust the release time to the tempo of the song. To get an idea of what pumping sounds like, take a song and set the compressor to a low threshold. Set a ratio of 20:1 and a fast release time. As a result, the dynamics will rise and fall in rather unnatural waves called pumping.
First time I met you, I was wondering who you were. How could I know you were the one for me?
The snare drum example in the compressor exercises is a good way to get a clearer picture of the potential uses of this parameter. The raspy snare sound can't be heard very well here. A shorter release time means that the snare strainer, in other words, the quieter parts of the snare sound, is increased in volume because the amplifier springs back quickly to its original value and thus increases the quieter parts of the material. Conversely, you can use a long release time to extend an acoustic guitar, which fades too quickly due to a lack of sustain. This technique can be used to move bass notes to the foreground that otherwise fade too quickly. I press bypass and on again. The release time thus gives us 3 ways to use compressors. Fine-tuning depending on song tempo and program material. Increasing the volume of quiet sections that immediately follow transients like snare drum strainer sounds. This requires short release times. Increasing the volume of quiet sections that would otherwise be drowned in the mix due to lack of sustain. With a decreasing input signal level, the VCA, voltage-controlled amplifier, jumps back to the starting position, thus amplifying the weakening signal. In that way, even a mediocre bass with old strings gets sufficient sustain for a good foundation. RMS peak is a rarely used parameter defining the characteristics of the release and compression behavior. RMS-oriented compression is advantageous in the mastering process in order to achieve the loudest possible results, whereas a peak-oriented compression is a pure top-end compression with little effect on the overall loudness. The only native devices to provide this parameter are the compressor from the Steinberg Surround Edition and MD3 software by PowerCore. Electro-opto. The electro mode is another description of RMS-oriented release behavior and is modeled on analog compressors. With this release behavior, the return speed of the VCA to the original setting increases the closer it gets to the original setting 0. Opto works the other way around. Here, the return speed decreases in line with the approach to 0. This opto behavior is very nice for drums, for example. Some Waves plugins offer you the choice between these two modes. The LA2A is another typical example of an opto-based compressor. The crossing at the threshold point is referred to as knee, or more exactly as a soft knee or a hard knee. For soft knee settings, the level reduction is applied moderately even before the threshold value is reached in order to achieve softer dynamics. Soft knee settings are particularly suitable for the subtle use of compressors. The use of soft knee settings is incompatible with the use of the attack parameter in order to generate snappiness because they pursue contradictory targets. It was the legendary DBX 160 which first introduced this function in order to achieve a subtle compression sound with a minimum of settings. Oxford Dynamics have a setting to emulate the DBX 160. The term sidechain is borrowed from hardware devices and either refers to a separate input, sidechain input, or a signal scanned by the input signal to detect peaks. This independent signal can generally be processed outside of the monitored signal with an EQ, generally a bandpass. For example, you can thus remove bass parts from the sidechain path to prevent the snare compressor from reacting to every beat of the bass drum. In a practical studio setting, a subtle physical sidechain input can be used to add a signal of a speaker track in order to control the background music with the level of this track. The music becomes quieter as soon as the dialogue part exceeds the preset threshold value. Within the software sector, this is a solution provided by the TC Native Bundle with Sidechainer plugin, which is no longer available. Some Waves stereo compressors provide the option of using one channel as a sidechain channel and the other for processing. That requires rather complex routings and does not permit the synchronized editing of stereo tracks. The new VST3 standard now allows sidechains. It can therefore be expected that this function will soon be used in many VST plugins. Gain reduction, or GR for short, generally refers to metering and shows level reduction on the corresponding display. The greater the displayed level reduction, the greater the compression. The speed with which the display jumps back to 0 indicates the release time setting. If the ratio is set to 1:1, there is no display because the compressor is inactive. If the compressor that you use has no automatic make-up gain function, that is, does not increase the output level in line with the compression, you can use the gain reduction display as a guideline for raising the output level. Once you have cut 6 dB from the peaks, you can raise the output level by 6 dB. Remember, though, that an honest A-B comparison of your compressor settings is only possible if you listen to the original and the processed version at the same volume setting.